Hello everyone, and welcome to the Okayest Computer YouTube channel. My name is Patrick, and today we're going to be talking about Radiohead. Yes, after all this time, I'm finally making a video about my favorite band, Radiohead. What we have here is a Radiohead Madness bracket. 128 Radiohead songs, all put in a March Madness style bracket. This was made by a very generous and very talented Redditor. I have included a link to the original post and original chart in the comments if you would like to fill out your own. I highly recommend it because this was very fun for me to do, and I would love to hear how your bracket turned out. And since this is a lot to handle, a lot to absorb, a lot of songs, we're just going to get started right away, go into the top left corner, and get started in the CR78 category. Right away, we have the band's most popular and notorious song, Creep, put up against Bangers and Mash from In Rainbow's Disc 2. Now, this was right away a very strange choice to make, because I have to decide, what do I want to do with Creep? This is a song that's kind of hard to talk about, because it is absurdly popular, but it is also one that a lot of fans hate, and the band themselves have grown to hate. However, I quite like it. I think it is a very, very nice song. If you take it for what it was, a 90s alt-rock single, it is a really, really solid 90s alt-rock single, and I find it to be really, really enjoyable today, despite the negative reputation it has received. So I did go with Creep over Bangers and Mash, and I do think that Bangers and Mash is a nice song. It is the one very loud, intense, kind of freak-out song from In Rainbow's Disc 2, but it kind of ruins the flow of the record. It doesn't keep the same emotions and ideas as the rest of the album, and it does feel really out of place in the track listing. Therefore, I do think that Creep is the better song, and that will be moving on in the bracket. Up next, Nice Dream and Go to Sleep. We have a song from The Bends up against a song from Hail to the Thief. While I do enjoy both on occasion, neither of them are very memorable to me, and I don't find myself listening to them very often. So it was kind of weird to choose between the two, but I did go with Go to Sleep over Nice Dream. I think that Go to Sleep is a very nice sort of interlude track. Go to Sleep is a very rare moment of calm on this album full of turmoil, and I think it does that very, very well. So I did go with Go to Sleep over Nice Dream. Next, Talk Show Host and Meeting in the Aisle, two different B-sides. Both of these are very beloved B-sides from their respective albums, one from The Bends and one from OK Computer. I did end up going with Talk Show Host over Meeting in the Aisle. It is absolutely stunning from start to finish. It features another excellently written riff, some beautiful vocals, and also some of Phil's best drums from these early days. They are so cacophonous and heavy, and they add so much power to this otherwise very quiet, subdued song. Next up, Lotus Flower and The Gloaming, one from The King of Limbs and one from Hail to the Thief once again. And I ended up going with Lotus Flower over The Gloaming. Colin Greenwood's bass line is simply iconic, to say the least. Phil and Clive's drums are so tight and accurate and groovy, and they work so perfectly to accompany that syncopated bass line. The guitars, though sparse and only appearing in certain moments of the song, they add so much to the atmosphere and the ambiance of the track, and Tom's vocals that reach into the higher part of his vocal range are absolutely beautiful. Lotus Flower is easily one of the best moments on The King of Limbs. Next up, Body Snatchers and Man of War. I did end up choosing Body Snatchers. I promise I will be nice to some of the OK Computer B-sides. I really, really like them. I do. But Body Snatchers is another pretty easy winner for me. I think that it is one of the most invigorating and furious moments on In Rainbows by far. The guitars are much heavier and louder and groovier than they usually are on the record, and that adds a lot of power to this otherwise very sad, very subtle album. High and Dry versus Polk Pole Revolving Doors. One from The Bends and one from Amnesiac, the first song on the bracket to come from Amnesiac, and I went with High and Dry. I think that Polk Pole Revolving Doors is one of the least interesting moments on Amnesiac. That's not to say it's bad. I do come back to it sometimes and think that it is a very well-produced and well-arranged song, but the synthesized, almost vocoder-like vocal monologue that is delivered on the song is highly uninteresting to me, and the highly repetitive lyrics don't really do much for me in terms of a moral or a message like some of the other songs on Amnesiac do. Separator and Fitter Happier, I ended up going with Separator. While it hurts to eliminate an album song from OK Computer so early in the bracket, Fitter Happier is nothing more than the interlude song. It is a great interlude song. It is so good. I love it. But like I said, it is nothing more than an interlude, whereas Separator is a very important and very excellent closer for the King of Limbs. And finally, No Surprises versus Kinetic. Another pretty simple choice for me. I went with No Surprises. I feel like I don't even have to explain that. No Surprises is one of the most legendary and emotional songs that Radiohead has made thus far, and there's really nothing that comes close to it. Not even a B-side that is as enjoyable as Kinetic. Now, narrowing it down, going between Separator and No Surprises, I once again went with No Surprises. And between Body Snatchers and High and Dry, I went with the heavy song. I went with Body Snatchers. Talk Show Host and Lotus Flower, I ended up going with Talk Show Host. That was a tough one because both of these are songs that are very near and dear to my heart. And between Creep and Go to Sleep, I did actually go with Creep. I think that it is a song that gets far too much hate, and even though it did kind of give the band a reputation they didn't deserve, it is a great song. So I'm not going to turn down a song that is as beautifully written and well-performed as Creep is. However, between Creep and Talk Show Host, I went with Talk Show Host, so yes, Creep didn't go that far. I did want to be reasonable with that. And with Body Snatchers and No Surprises, I once again went with the ballad. I love me some No Surprises, so yeah, I did go with No Surprises. And narrowing it down to these last two, Talk Show Host and No Surprises, I went with No Surprises. No Surprises, you can't really say no to it. It absolutely demolishes everything else in this section of the bracket for me. So yeah, No Surprises wins the CR7-8 portion. And moving down to the Ed portion, I love that name, we have Paranoid Android and Palo Alto. Kind of a no-brainer for me. I'm gonna go with Paranoid Android. I think that when you put an album track and a B-side from the album against each other, the album track is always going to win, especially if it's one that is as significant and vital to the record as Paranoid Android is. Between Videotape and Sulk, I went with Videotape. I love me a good closing song, and I think that Videotape is one of the strongest finishes on any Radiohead album thus far, and has become one of the most beloved songs on In Rainbows, and for good reason. Next up, the National Anthem and Dollars and Cents. I went with the National Anthem. It's the bass line. It is the repetitive but absolutely irresistible drums. It is the crazy brass ensemble. Just everything on this song comes together flawlessly. And between Reckoner and Ripcord, absolutely I'm going with Reckoner. Once again, come on, it's in Rainbows. It's Reckoner. Despite all of these not even close type of competitions, Full Stop and Life in a Glass House did require a lot more thought. One as an early point on A Moon-Shaped Pool, where we establish a lot of those core lyrical themes that would go on to drive the rest of the record, and the other a closer for Amnesiac, an album that is pretty unstable, pretty inconsistent, so you gotta have a strong finish, and Life in a Glass House is absolutely a grand finale. I went with Life in a Glass House over Full Stop. It's really beyond words. I'm just left speechless every time I hear it. Another one where the brass instruments are used to a beautiful effect. Here we have another Reckoner-like situation where I'm absolutely going with How to Disappear Completely over I Can't, which is a fine but ultimately very forgettable moment on Pablo Honey. Between The Numbers and Scatterbrain, I did go with The Numbers because I feel like that is a much more beautiful song. I think that A Moon-Shaped Pool packs a huge emotional punch from front to back. The Numbers is no exception, and I don't get a lot of that from Scatterbrain. Between The Butcher and Down is the New Up. Here we have the first appearance of a King of Limbs B-side on the bracket, The Butcher being a B-side to Super Collider, which was another non-album song. I like both of those. I think The Butcher is the better of the two songs on that single, but I did end up going with Down is the New Up, and I think that Down is the New Up does so much in a small amount of time, with really, really beautiful lyrics introducing the record, and also a fantastic piano performance from Thom Yorke. And let's narrow this one down between Paranoid Android and Videotape. This one really, really hurt, because although I do prefer Paranoid Android, and I chose Paranoid Android, I really adore Videotape, so knocking it out of the bracket this early was painful to say the least. Between the National Anthem and Reckoner, another absolutely brutal choice to make, but I did choose Reckoner. I think that it is really a centerpiece and a defining moment on In Rainbows. Probably the most grand and extravagant on the album. Between Life in a Glass House and How to Disappear Completely, I chose How to Disappear Completely. That is a pivotal moment on Kid A, and also a very significant song for Thom Yorke as an artist and a person. Between The Numbers and Down is the New Up, I did go with Down is the New Up. I really love The Numbers, very strong moment on A Moon-Shaped Pool, but I think that Down is the New Up is definitely one of the more underrated Radiohead songs to me, and I'll try not to use that term very often, but I do think that that song does not get the love it deserves. Between Down is the New Up and How to Disappear Completely, I went with How to Disappear Completely, being a song that is such a landmark achievement for Thom and for Radiohead as a whole. And between Paranoid Android and Reckoner, definitely the hardest choice I've had to make so far, because I adore both of these. They were truly life-changing songs for me, but I did choose Paranoid Android. I think that both of them deserve so much love, and I would not be mad if anybody else chose Reckoner. But with Paranoid Android, I feel like I can't even begin to describe how important that song is to me, and this is based on personal preference. So going entirely based on personal preference, I do prefer Paranoid Android, and I also went with that over How to Disappear Completely. I love How to Disappear Completely, but I think that Paranoid Android, when it comes to songs that are very important to my life and important to the career of the band, I think that Paranoid Android is the superior song. And finishing off this first quarter of the bracket between No Surprises and Paranoid Android, the winner of these first two portions, I chose Paranoid Android. I think that Paranoid Android does a lot more for delivering a solid concept and a kind of grand statement on what the album is as a whole. So I chose Paranoid Android over No Surprises, and that is my winner of the first quarter of this bracket. All right, we are done with a quarter of the bracket. We are moving on to the top right with the Fat Ugly Dead section, starting with Karma Police and The Bends. I went with Karma Police. Karma Police is a strong contender for the best song on OK Computer, and one of the true all-time greats in Radiohead's discography. It is truly larger than life, especially that finale. I think the ending of the song is really what does it for me. I don't dislike the title track from The Bends. I think that it is a perfectly fine song, but it absolutely pales in comparison to Karma Police in my eyes. Dealing with You and Whose Army versus Backdrifts, I went with You and Whose Army. Backdrifts is a good song, but I think that it is nothing more than good. Especially when surrounded by so many amazing songs on Hail to the Thief. It's definitely a lull in the track list, whereas I feel like You and Whose Army is one of the most compelling moments on Amnesiac easily. And with There There and How Do You, I absolutely went with There There. How Do You is actually one of my least favorite songs on Pablo Honey, whereas There There is, was, and always will be one of the best songs on Hail to the Thief. And between Lucky and Melatonin, I am going to knock out the B-side once again. I went with Lucky. This is another situation where they put a song from the core album versus a B-side from that album, and once again, I'm absolutely going with the album track. I think that Lucky, like Paranoid Android, is a very important song to drive the narrative and the story of OK Computer, and it does that in a very, very beautiful ballad song. Another one of my favorite moments on the record. Between Nude and Untitled, this was peculiar to say the least. If you don't know, Untitled is the very short, I believe less than a minute long, ambient hidden track at the end of Kid A, coming after Motion Picture Soundtrack, the real closer for the record. So that was peculiar when I saw that it was up against a song as monumental as Nude, one of the early signs on In Rainbows that we're in for something that is absolutely legendary. So yeah, I picked Nude over Untitled, not because I dislike Untitled, but because it is barely a song, whereas Nude is one of the best songs on In Rainbows to me. Between Just and Up on the Ladder, I went with Just. I think that was one of the strongest songs from the Bends and from the first two Radiohead albums in general. Just is one of the most visceral and invigorating tracks in the Bends tracklist by far. So it was pretty easy for me to choose that over Up on the Ladder. Between I Promise and Feral, this is my first time actually choosing an OK Not OK song, but I did go with I Promise. I know that there are a lot of people that really love Feral. I've had some people say that it's actually their favorite song on The King of Limbs, but I just can't agree with that. I think that the instrumental Radiohead songs are quite enjoyable, but Feral is not one of them. And yes, there are technically vocals, but they are barely audible throughout the entire song, and you can't even understand what he's saying. That is very, very aggravating to me, coming from somebody who really loves Tom's voice and his lyrics. Between Burn the Witch and Staircase, another no-brainer for me, I went with Burn the Witch. I think that it is such an incredible opening song. A contender for the best Radiohead opener ever, maybe? I don't know. It might be. Burn the Witch has basically become synonymous with this current era of Radiohead and what they've been doing on A Moon-Shaped Pool and after A Moon-Shaped Pool. It's become kind of the cornerstone of post-King of Limbs Radiohead, of Radiohead as we know them today. And moving on, narrowing this one down, between I Promise and Burn the Witch, I went with Burn the Witch. Between Nude and Just, I went with Nude. While I do have a lot of fond memories and nostalgia surrounding the song Just, I think that Nude is one of the most indescribably gorgeous songs Radiohead has ever made. Between There, and Lucky, this one hurt. Another one where I absolutely adore both of these songs, so choosing among them is very, very difficult. But I went with There. Yeah, that I know a lot of people are going to be mad at me for that. A lot of people love Lucky, and I love Lucky too. But I think that There is such a solid and powerful song, so much more than a lot of the songs on Hail to the Thief. And between Karma Police and You and Whose Army, I went with Karma Police. You and Whose Army is nice, but I think that Karma Police is absolutely stellar start to finish. There's really nothing else like it that has ever been made before and will ever be made again. It's the kind of song that you hear once and you never stop thinking about it. And I have never stopped thinking about it, and I have never stopped loving it. I don't think I ever will, and that is why I chose it over You and Whose Army, and also why I chose it over There. And between Nude and Burn the Witch, I went with Nude. Sorry, Burn the Witch. Sorry, A Moon-Shaped Pool. But Nude is one of my favorite Radiohead ballads ever recorded. And between Karma Police and Nude, once again, a very hard decision to make, but I did go with Karma Police. I think that a lot of the beauty of Nude comes from the atmosphere of it more than what's actually being written and recorded here. And I think when it comes down to songwriting, Karma Police is definitely the better piece of music to me. Moving on to the Flan section, a very nice reference to A Wolf at the Door. I love that. And we have Idiotech versus Pearly. I went with Idiotech. I feel like I'm being really, really mean to the OK Computer B-sides, and I don't want you to think I dislike those, but when it comes to the arrangement of this bracket, they are so often put against some of the true cornerstones of Radiohead's work, such as Idiotech. Idiotech is easily my favorite electronic Radiohead song. When it comes to that sound and that style of their music, it is definitely the standout song. Black Star and Mixomatosis. This was a weird matchup because neither of these songs get a lot of discussion. They are both songs that I would also describe as underrated. Sorry to use that term again. But I actually went with what I think is the more underrated song, Black Star. That's actually one of my favorite songs on the Bends, and it seems like not enough people are talking about how amazing it is. And moving on between Morning Bell Amnesiac and Desert Island Disc, I actually chose Morning Bell Amnesiac. While some people do think, oh, it's just a rehash of a Kid A song that's not done as well, it doesn't have that kind of same feeling and vibe as the original song does, I think it is very, 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 very good, and I cannot stress that enough. I think that it's actually the better performance of Morning Bell. Hot take, I actually prefer the Amnesiac one. I think that while the very cold and very calculated performance on Kid A works a lot in adding to the very desolate and isolated feel of the record, I think that the Amnesiac performance is so much more grandiose and dramatic and almost theatrical in a way, and it does a lot more for me emotionally than the Kid A rendition. So I did end up choosing that over Desert Island Disc. While that is a very nice acoustic moment on a Moon-Shaped Pool, and we don't get a lot of those, I think that Present Tense is definitely the better acoustic song on a Moon-Shaped Pool, and Morning Bell Amnesiac is the clear winner for me. Between Subterranean Homesick Alien and Go Slowly, I went with Subterranean Homesick Alien. I think Go Slowly is another song that doesn't really get the praise it deserves. It is really beautiful, and it's a standout moment on a record full of standout moments, but I think that Subterranean Homesick Alien is just, it's so good. I mean, what more can I say about it? The songwriting is absolutely top-notch. Some of the most emotionally compelling and well-composed songwriting that we get on OK Computer. Between Kid A and Anyone Can Play Guitar, I chose Kid A. The title track from the album very early on in the track list establishes that this is a very different album. It's not like anything the band has ever made before, and it's not like anything they'll ever make again. The songwriting is absolutely impeccable once again, and I think that Anyone Can Play Guitar doesn't quite reach those heights. It is one of the better songs on Pablo Honey, but Anyone Can Play Guitar absolutely pales in comparison to the title track from Kid A. And I could say the same for 2 + 2 = 5 against Lurgy. I believe it's pronounced Lurgy. And I went with 2 + 2 = 5. The absolutely explosive opener from Hail to the Thief. Yet another very, very strong opening song, and I don't get that from Lurgy, which is absolutely one of my least favorite songs from Pablo Honey. Between Bloom and Faust Arp, this is another weird one because we have the super strong opener from one of the band's weakest records up against the 2-minute acoustic interlude from one of their best albums. So, yeah, this was strange. I did end up going with Bloom. I'm sorry. It hurts to knock out an In Rainbow song this early, but I really, really think that Bloom is one of the most beautiful songs to come out of that era of Radiohead. Between Present Tense and what I believe is Harry Patch in Memory of, if that is what that is, I'm going to go with Present Tense. I think that Present Tense is the strongest acoustic moment on a Moon-Shaped Pool, slightly more so than Desert Island Disc, and it's one of my favorites on the record, mostly for the incredible percussion work and the very emotional vocal performance, and I think that it does a lot more for me than Harry Patch does. And narrowing this one down, we are almost done with the top half. Between Idiotech and Black Star, I went with Idiotech. While I would love for Black Star to advance further, since I think that that song does not get enough love, I think that Idiotech absolutely deserves all of the love that it already gets. Between Subterranean Homesick Alien and Morning Bell Amnesiac, I went with Subterranean Homesick Alien. Between Kid A and 2 + 2 = 5, I went with 2 + 2. 2 + 2 = 5 is one of the most aggravated and furious songs that Radiohead has ever recorded, and it is such a riveting moment. Between Bloom and Present Tense, I'm once again going with the intro song. I'm gonna pick Bloom. It is such a crazy and disorienting and yet simultaneously overwhelmingly beautiful song. Between 2 + 2 = 5 and Bloom, Battle of the Openers, I actually went with 2 + 2 = 5. While Bloom is absolutely gorgeous instrumentally, it doesn't offer a lot in terms of lyrics, whereas 2 + 2 = 5 features some of my favorite lyrics on all of Hail to the Thief. And between Idiotech and Subterranean Homesick Alien, I went with Idiotech. Once again, these are both songs that I think are instrumentally incredible, so I had to go in and say which one I thought had the better songwriting, and I think that the terrified and frantic writing in Idiotech is one of the best pieces of songwriting Tom York has ever done. So I went with Idiotech, and then between Idiotech and 2 + 2 = 5, I also went with Idiotech. Like I said, I think that it is the finest example of Radiohead's electronic sound. And for that reason, I actually chose Idiotic over Karma Police. And I know that's going to be another controversial one because both of these are very beloved and nearly perfect songs. When we think about songs that have come to define the band, their sound, what they do, what they stand for, that is exactly what Idiotek is. They somehow made one of the best electronic songs we've heard this century, and they don't even make electronic music. So I absolutely went with Idiotek over Karma Police, as much as I adore Karma Police. And between Paranoid Android and Idiotek, I did go with Paranoid Android. Now, I understand I have been so nice to Idiotek so far. I put it up against so many legendary songs, but Paranoid Android is the clear winner for me when it comes to the top half of this bracket. It is a song that has absolutely changed my life for the better, and I'm sure it has done that for many people besides myself. So I mostly did this for personal reasons. I'll probably end up making a video eventually someday on why I think that Paranoid Android is as incredible as it is. But for now, I'm just going to say it was absolutely life-changing for me. For that reason, I did have Paranoid Android as the winner of the top half of the bracket. Alright, here we are in the bottom half of the bracket. Now the sections are named after the band members. I love that. And we're going to start with the Greenwood section, which is named after both Colin and Johnny. Starting with Fake Plastic Trees and 4-Minute Warning, I went with Fake Plastic Trees, mostly because I think that 4-Minute Warning is one of the weakest moments on In Rainbow's Disc 2. When it comes to songs that really define the band's early days, Fake Plastic Trees is one of the first that comes to mind, so I did choose it over 4-Minute Warning. And with Glass Eyes versus Give Up the Ghost, I went with Glass Eyes. This is another one that took a lot of thought because they are both personal favorites on each of their respective albums. Give Up the Ghost is kind of unimaginative in comparison. While the lyrics are very pretty, I really like them, I think that the production does not do much for me. It is the same vocal melody, the same acoustic guitar chords, and it just does that for the entire length of the song, and the very loudly mixed verse vocals are the only thing keeping it from being more than just a collection of loops. And between 15 Step and You, I really like You. I think that it's one of the best songs on Pablo Honey by far, but it is also a song on Pablo Honey, and the album as a whole is not very good compared to In Rainbows, which is very good. So I chose the opening song on In Rainbows over the opening song on Pablo Honey. Between Codex and We Suck Young Blood, I actually chose Codex. Codex is definitely the most emotional moment on The King of Limbs, an album that can sometimes come across as lifeless, sometimes monotonous, and Codex is far from that. It is really beautiful. So I chose that over We Suck Young Blood, which is one of the less compelling moments on Hail to the Thief. Between Climbing Up the Walls and Packed Like Sardines in a Crushed Tin Box, I chose Climbing Up the Walls. While I do really like Packed Like Sardines in a Crushed Tin Box, and I think it has one of my favorite Radiohead song titles, Climbing Up the Walls absolutely blows it out of the water for me. I think that Packed Like Sardines is a fine opener. I think that it's a great song, but it is nowhere near as compelling and explosive as some of the other starts to Radiohead albums. So I chose Climbing Up the Walls over that very subdued song. It doesn't really work as an introduction to the album. But speaking of introductions to the album, between Airbag and LOL, I went with Airbag. There's not much more that I can say about it other than it is a beautiful cacophony of sound, a perfect start to the album, and LOL does not do that for me. Between Electioneering and Where I End and You Begin, I actually went with Where I End and You Begin. It features Tom's best songwriting, some of the best guitar, and some of the grooviest drums to appear on Hail to the Thief. A real standout moment on this record, and for that I am going to choose it over Electioneering, which is unfortunately not the standout moment on OK Computer. And between Pyramid Song and Molasses, this was a pretty simple one to me. I definitely go with Pyramid Song. It is a truly spellbinding orchestral track, and Molasses is everything but that. One of the best songs on Amnesiac, and arguably one of the best songs the band has ever made. For that reason, I also went with it over Where I End and You Begin. Between Airbag and Climbing Up the Walls, two songs from OK Computer that I love very much, I chose Airbag. I definitely prefer the introduction to the record, more than I prefer some of the songs that come later in the track list. Between 15 Step and Kodaks, once again, going with the opener, I love 15 Step. Even though there are quite a few songs on In Rainbows that I consider to be superior, I think that it's such a cool way to start the record. There's not much to say about it that hasn't already been said. If you don't love 15 Step, I highly disagree with you, and I suggest you rethink that. And then with Fake Plastic Trees and Glass Eyes, I definitely go with Fake Plastic Trees. Fake Plastic Trees is one of the best songs to come out of the first two Radiohead albums, period. However, I did choose 15 Step over Fake Plastic Trees, and I chose Pyramid Song over Airbag. That one hurts because I really love Airbag and I wanted that to go farther, but it's the strings, the orchestra, they leave me speechless every time I hear it. So I did go with that over Airbag. And that ultimately led to me choosing Pyramid Song as the winner of the Greenwood section. And moving on to O'Brien, here's what we are dealing with in that section. We have Street Spirit Fade Out versus MK1. I definitely would go with Street Spirit. I don't dislike MK1, but it is merely an introduction to In Rainbows Disc 2 that just recycles samples from videotape and loops them for a short amount of time. It does not do as much for me as the closer to the Bends, Street Spirit Fade Out. If you have heard it and you have not cried, you need help. Bones and In Limbo. I went with In Limbo. It isn't one of the stronger moments on the record, but it does a lot more for me in terms of making Kid A very cohesive listening experience than Bones does, which is honestly very forgettable in comparison. Between Optimistic and Like Spinning Plates, this was a tough one. I really love both of these, but I did go with Optimistic. It is the sole rock-based song on Kid A, which is a primarily electronic and piano-based record. The guitar riff is one of my favorites that Johnny has ever performed. It is really beautiful, and the fact that it plays in unison with Tom's vocals in the intro, the two create such a beautiful effect together, and not to mention, those drums, Phil absolutely kills it on that song. Between Jigsaw and How I Made My Millions, I'm once again going to be eliminating the OK Computer B-side and going with Jigsaw Falling Into Place. I think that Jigsaw is a very cool song, features more stellar drums from Phil Selway. I think it has one of my favorite vocal performances from Tom on the album, very dynamic and expressive, and it explores so much of his range. It is very impressive. Between Tree Fingers and Lift, I'm gonna break the cycle. I'm actually choosing Lift. I'm picking the B-side this time. I think that is one of the best songs to appear on OK Not OK, whereas Tree Fingers is, once again, it doesn't feel like much more than an interlude to me. Between House of Cards and Vegetable, do I even need to explain why I'm not choosing Vegetable? I just don't like that song. Between A Wolf at the Door and Hunting Bears, this is one where it feels like you're putting a full real song up against an interlude, so I'm going with A Wolf at the Door. Not because Hunting Bears is bad, but because it is merely a transition, an interlude, a guitar solo, and Wolf at the Door is actually a legitimate song. Between Identikit and Prove Yourself, another one that doesn't really need much explanation, I'm of course going with Identikit. That was a song that actually appeared not just on A Moon-Shaped Pool, but also in setlists during the King of Limbs days, and even in those early days, it was a very promising and impressive song. And narrowing this one down between Street Spirit and In Limbo, I went with Street Spirit Fade Out. Between Optimistic and Jigsaw Falling Into Place, I feel like I get a lot more out of Optimistic than I do with Jigsaw, and I chose Optimistic. Between Lift and House of Cards, I went with House of Cards. Between Wolf at the Door and Identikit, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of A Wolf at the Door, so I did go with Identikit. Between Identikit and House of Cards, I went with House of Cards. Definitely, like I said, one of the most beautiful moments on an album full of beautiful moments, and so I chose that over Identikit, which doesn't quite pack that emotional gut punch. And speaking of emotional gut punch, I did go with Street Spirit Fade Out over Optimistic. I'm loving those ballads, I'm loving those closing songs, and Street Spirit is both of those done perfectly. And for that reason, I also chose it over House of Cards. It still stands out to this day, it aged extremely well, and I can't say that about a lot of the other songs on the Bends. However, when I put it up against Pyramid Song, I have my winner as Pyramid Song. Johnny Greenwood is an amazing arranger and composer for a string ensemble, and Pyramid Song is a perfect example of that. He absolutely nailed it on this one, and that combined with the very somber and morbid piano performance and the very haunting vocals, Pyramid Song has absolutely stood the test of time, and it still hits so hard to this day. Going to the Selway section, we are starting with Daydreaming and Last Flowers. I did end up choosing Daydreaming. I think that Daydreaming very early on establishes that A Moon-Shaped Pool will be a devastating album, and it is a devastating song, to say the least. But I don't think that it tries too hard to be sad. It just naturally is. And the ambiance built with the synthesizers, with the very quiet, reverb-heavy guitars, and especially with those pianos, it is really something else. Between I Might Be Wrong and Motion Picture Soundtrack, this should not come as a surprise. I chose Motion Picture Soundtrack. I love the closers, and I love Kid A. Are you noticing a pattern yet? And I honestly think that Motion Picture Soundtrack is another contender for the best songwriting on Kid A. It's another one of those songs that says a lot by saying a little. And that final line alone, I will see you in the next life, one of the most devastating moments on the album, and I absolutely love it. Between True Love Waits and I Will, I went with True Love Waits. I have a very long explanation for why I chose True Love Waits, and I will save that for later. Between My Iron Lung and The Daily Mail, I chose My Iron Lung, not because I dislike The Daily Mail, but because I think that My Iron Lung was a very important moment for the band. In a time that they were separating themselves from Creep and from all of that fame that they got as a result of Creep, they wanted to make a song that said, we are more than just this one song. We are good, and we are sick of all of that. And they made My Iron Lung, which is an angry and provocative and beautiful song. Between Planet Telex and Little by Little, I went with Planet Telex. I like Little by Little, but I think that the chorus is honestly quite irritating to me. That's not something I get from a lot of Radiohead songs, but I do get that from Little by Little. Even the other more rock-based song, Morning Mr. Magpie, I feel like it does that slightly better. Between Weird Fishes and Stop Whispering, it's not even close. I'm going with Weird Fishes. That is a song that needs no introduction, needs no explanation. It is absolutely gorgeous. And between The Tourist and Sail to the Moon, I went with The Tourist. That is one of my favorite songs on OK Computer. An incredible end to an incredible album. And while I do enjoy Sail to the Moon, I think that it does not capture that same magic that the start of Hail to the Thief does. And it does generate what I think is the first lull in the track list. Between Letdown and Reminder, I am going to repeat myself once again and choose the album track over the B-side, Letdown over Reminder. You've heard it all before. Letdown is beautiful. It's a fan favorite for good reason. And between Letdown and The Tourist, another battle of two wonderful songs from OK Computer, I went with Letdown. I think that The Tourist is a very strong finale, but Letdown, I think, does a lot more to guide the concept of the record than The Tourist does. While it is a very nice end to the record, there is something about Letdown that is so incredibly charming and unforgettable to me. Between Weird Fishes and Planet Telex, I'm going with Weird Fishes. I think that Weird Fishes is a song that is intentionally ambiguous, but overwhelmingly beautiful no matter how you interpret it. It is a song that can appeal to absolutely anyone and everyone, and for that reason, I think it is absolutely better than Planet Telex. Between True Love Waits and My Iron Lung, I am once again going with True Love Waits. I will explain myself about why I love True Love Waits so much later. And between Daydreaming and Motion Picture Soundtrack, I went with Motion Picture Soundtrack. It is a flawless end to Kid A, and it features probably some of the best songwriting Tom has ever done. Between Weird Fishes and Letdown, I chose Weird Fishes, because that is easily one of my favorite tracks on In Rainbows as a whole. And between True Love Waits and Motion Picture Soundtrack, I went with True Love Waits. And between True Love Waits and Weird Fishes, I also went with True Love Waits. I think you all deserve an explanation as to why I am being so generous to True Love Waits. It started out as a song written as early as the late 90s in the Benson OK Computer days. It was just left in limbo, pun absolutely intended, for decades. And nobody was quite sure why. It appeared on the I Might Be Wrong live album, but that was the only time that we actually got an album release of this song. So after all this time of waiting, we finally get True Love Waits on an album, and it is A Moon-Shaped Pool. And I think having the end of A Moon-Shaped Pool be the most mysterious and cryptic and mythical song the band has ever created. It makes so much sense to me. The fact that they would make this album about love and loss and isolation and despair, and they would end it with the long-awaited release of a song that covers all of those topics and more in such a short period of time. It is an excellent end to the record, it is an excellent song, and it is one of the most beautiful songs I have ever heard. So for that reason, I do think that True Love Waits is the winner of the Selway portion, and it is also one of my all-time favorite Radiohead songs. Anyways, that was kind of an excessive rant, so let's move on. And we're gonna finish things up here. I'm sure I have kept you for a very, very long time, so I will try to make this as quick and reasonable as I possibly can. We're starting with Everything in Its Right Place versus MK2. Another situation like Street Spirit versus MK1. While it is a nice interlude, it is nothing more than an ambient interlude, so I feel kind of obligated to put the absolutely monumental achievement that is Everything in Its Right Place above merely an interlude song. And between Bulletproof, I Wish I Was, and Sit Down, Stand Up, I'm not particularly fond of either of these songs, but I do prefer Bulletproof. I think that Sit Down, Stand Up is extremely underwhelming in terms of songwriting, and they have to make up for it with this very extravagant kind of melodramatic production that jumps around between all of these sections and ideas with little to no cohesion or anything connecting them to each other. Between Knives Out and Spectre, I went with Knives Out, one of the standout songs on an album that is usually very uneven and inconsistent. Between All I Need and Thinking About You, another no-brainer, I'm of course going to go with All I Need. Thinking About You is nice, it is one of the better songs on Pablo Honey, but I'm going to go with one of the best ballad songs on In Rainbows. Between Morning Mr. Magpie and the Kid A version of Morning Bell, I'm going to go with Morning Bell. Like I said before, Morning Mr. Magpie is the other rock-based song on The King of Limbs, alongside Little by Little, and I think that Morning Bell is a much more fulfilling listening experience than Morning Mr. Magpie, which is not bad, but it seems lacking in creativity. It seems like they wrote one guitar riff and just thought, how can we make our entire song revolve around this with no variation and no changes whatsoever? And between Dex Dark and Polyethylene, I went with Dex Dark. Polyethylene is a very nice B-side, one of the better ones from OK Computer as a whole, in my opinion, but I think that Dex Dark, being a part of that near perfect 3-track run at the start of A Moon-Shaped Pool, is absolutely the better song to me. And speaking of A Moon-Shaped Pool, here we have A Punch Up at a Wedding up against the one with the really long title from A Moon-Shaped Pool. I'm just going to call it Tinker Tailor, and I think that Tinker Tailor is the better song. Tinker Tailor does that electronic sound really well, one of the only times that happens on A Moon-Shaped Pool, so it was a welcome surprise. And I think A Punch Up at a Wedding is very, very forgettable to me. I don't dislike it, I guess. I don't really dislike a Radiohead song, but I think that A Punch Up at a Wedding could have absolutely been cut from the Hail to the Thief tracklist and nothing would have changed. And finally, between Exit Music for a Film and Blowout, once again, very, very obvious, I'm going with Exit Music for a Film. The stunning soundtrack song from Romeo and Juliet, the other one alongside talk show host, and it absolutely demolishes Blowout to me. There is no doubt about it. Speaking of demolishing songs in the ranking, I definitely would go with Exit Music over Tinker Tailor, and I decided to go with Morning Bell over Dex Dark. Like I said, I don't think it's the better rendition of the song, but I think that it is a better song than Dex Dark. And between Knives Out and All I Need, I'm once again going with the ballad, going with the In Rainbow song. I really, really love All I Need, so I'm gonna pick that one. And between Everything in Its Right Place and Bulletproof I Wish I Was, I chose Everything in Its Right Place. With Morning Bell and Exit Music, I chose Exit Music, and I chose Everything in Its Right Place over All I Need. That was a tough one, because I really adore All I Need. Nobody was prepared for Kid A. Nobody knew this was gonna happen. Nobody thought that the band that made OK Computer was gonna make a song that sounded like this. And that element of surprise, accompanied by the fact that it is just a really beautiful electronic song, does make it better than All I Need to me, and slightly better than Exit Music for a Film. However, putting Everything in Its Right Place up against True Love Waits, I went with True Love Waits, and between Pyramid Song and True Love Waits, I went with True Love Waits. It is a song that has lived in infamy for many decades. Nobody was sure when it would actually get released, and when it finally did, it was absolutely devastating in the best way possible. So yes, my winner for the bottom half of the bracket is True Love Waits. Now we come down to the final two. We have Paranoid Android and True Love Waits. Now, I chose Paranoid Android based on my personal preference, and I chose True Love Waits based on both personal preference and the importance that it has in the band's history. So that makes both of these very, very strong contenders for the best Radiohead song. However, if you know me, you know what my favorite song to ever exist is, and you know the song that has absolutely defined who I am as a person, and that is Paranoid Android. So I did choose Paranoid Android as my favorite Radiohead song and the winner of the bracket. While it would take me probably the length of an entire video to explain why I chose Paranoid Android, I'm gonna keep it simple and say I heard this song at a time in my life when I absolutely needed to hear this song. I would not be the person who I am today if it were not for this song, and I'm sorry if that is too vague of an explanation. I'm sorry if you wanted True Love Waits or one of the other songs from OK Computer or In Rainbows, but I think that when it comes down to personal enjoyment, which is what this bracket is, I'm definitely going with Paranoid Android. And that is the end of the video. I would love to hear what you think of it in the comments. I would love to hear if you have any differing choices. Remember, opinions change, opinions disagree, and that is totally okay. Thank you so much for watching. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Follow my other social media profiles for more content every day, and give my new EP a listen. I think you'll like it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a very nice day.